Now, what I'm really excited about is really just the notion of, how when we start to think about launching businesses, especially during this kind of COVID days, as we're now referring to it, what does it really mean to kind of look at a launch, right? How do you go about doing a launch checklist? And how do you actually start to think about what are the components that you need to make sure it's successful? Now, what's interesting is you can launch a business in as little as 3 weeks, which I did back in April with a partner. Or you can actually take your time and launch your business over the course of a year or over 6 months. But ultimately, guys, the confluence of how you look at business launching ultimately has to do with how you're looking at revenue, so how you're spending your resources up against what your merchandising and kind of your inventory product looks like, and then kind of looking at that in the context of how things are being deployed with the market, right? Now, obviously, there are things like your 3PL, your shipping and logistics, those sorts of things that we don't ultimately really think too much about. In fact, I was talking to a client the other day, and in our conversations, we were talking about how important it is to be thinking holistically 360 about the launch. Up until that point, right, her and her partner had only been thinking about business launch insofar as it was like getting us to the next step, and then getting us to the next step, and then getting us to the next step. When actually what we need to be doing is kind of taking a step back and saying, what's the 360 of what it means to actually have a business launch, right, or have a product launch? And then based on that 360, how do we then map out the right allocation of resources? Now, that's like a really hard thing to do. It's not one of those things where you would, say, okay, I know how I'm going to spend all of my money. Most people don't walk into business launches actually knowing how they're going to be spending all of their resources. And so sitting down and kind of looking at those product market launch opportunities, I think is important. So we're going to go through a little bit of a checklist, which is exciting. We'll take some questions on how you guys are looking at your own launches. We'll take some questions on how you guys are approaching things like, fulfillment needs, right? Who's actually going to be packing and shipping out those goods? Unfortunately, guys, there are too many of you out there who are just focused on getting to launch, but are not thinking about how you're actually operationally going to be selling anything. And when we think about what a launch is, or what constitutes a launch is just opening up your website, right? A launch isn't just hours. In fact, your business could be considered in launch mode, right? From the moment you send out that press release, or the moment you send out, that piece of that article, right? That is kind of your press. And it comes down to what is that component in terms of what press looks like, and then kind of moving out from there, right? And saying, okay, well, if press is going to look like this, and this is going to be our first moment of launch, whatever that first moment of launch is to the public, not to your friends and family, right? It's important to think about it in context of the public. Think about what it looks like in context to the public, right? Well, then on the flip side, what you're thinking about is how is that actually then translating or kind of reverting back to what it's going to look like internally in terms of what a launch is, right? And I think that that's important over a certain period of time. And so what I think is important to consider here is we're looking from the components of how to be launching. I say 6 months before you doing all of your prep work. And then once you launch, you have another 6 months after that to consider your brand still in that launching phase. So what should that be looking like? Well, the 6 months leading up to it, you want to make sure that you've actually got all of the things, all the boxes checked off, right? When we're looking at things like going to be looking at your packaging, making sure you have enough packaging, making sure you understand your shipping and logistics providers are going to be. So are you signing up with USPS? Is it PS? Is it who are you shipping with? So to tighten up some operations. We're going to be looking at things like, beyond packaging and shipping, who is going to be doing the shipping? So do you actually need to have a, part-time assistant who's going to help you fulfill packages. That's super important. From fulfillment of packages, we're then going to look into things like, how are we going to be approaching shipping and logistics? How are we going to be approaching things along the sides of the supply chain? So how are we going to be looking at the supply chain in terms of how often are we going to be reordering? So what's our we also want to make sure, outside of understanding the manufacturing areas of your fulfillment, on things like not just production but also lead time to procuring fabric, right? So oftentimes we're not buying fabric, we're not buying trims based on the opportunity to be able to sell or kind of repeat sell. More often than not, we're kind of buying in order to test. So as you're doing your fabric purchasing and as you're doing your trim buying, you want to make sure that you know what's the lead time going to be. Is this going to be a stock fabric? Is it something I can reorder into, or is it not? And I think that is really important to consider. At the same time, as we're looking at, what the production side is going to look like, and certainly managing production, quality control, et cetera, we're also going to be looking at the cadence by which you're going to be executing. So most people firstly think about marketing, but ultimately marketing is the last thing, because it's the thing that actually supports all these other components, right? If you don't actually know how you're going to reorder product, why are you launching something when it's just going to sell through and you're not going to be able to follow that up with kind of what the next thing, or knowing where to be moving towards? So now we start to move and take a look at your marketing components. So what constitutes a good launch? Well, obviously you don't want to drive any traffic to a website unless you have retargeting ads. You don't want to have any retargeting ads set up unless you have regular ads that's really pulling people in. Well, what are the different ways of looking at your funnels, right? So as you have your kind of 6 or 7 different customer touch points, you're likely to be allocating resources to things like programmatic advertising. You're probably going to be so programmatic is kind of the banner ads that you see on different websites. You're looking at programmatic, you're looking at Facebook and Instagram. You might also be looking at Pinterest. You might be doing direct mail, which I think is a great strategy to look at. You might also be looking at affiliate marketing and Share-a-Sale and Rakuten and places like that. Those are all extremely viable and worthwhile places that you want to invest in kind of a 360. And if you don't look 360 at advertising and you just double down and focus on one channel, what you'll find is that you're overly dependent on that channel. And I think that that is not healthy for business, right? That's not something that you want to continue to do. So when we're looking at kind of the areas of how the business is executing on marketing, you also then have your channels. So your organic social, we're also looking at things like the cadence for your social posting. What is the copywriting going to be looking like? What's your newsletter cadence? What is the frequency, right, of newsletters? Are you launching with any sort of promos for your sign up for your newsletter? What is that like for you, right? So that entire 360 of how you're kind of looking at acquisition also has to be looked at in terms of conversion and your funnels. Are you set up with the right email service provider, guys? I mean, gosh, email service providers mean that MailChimp is no longer synergistic with Shopify. So that might mean that you guys have to translate your email service provider to something like a Klaviyo, right? So make sure you have the right set of tools and the right suite of systems kind of set up in order to make sure that it's successful. Otherwise, boom, you're shooting yourself in the foot and you're going to be like, why didn't I think about that? Why didn't I think about the newsletter frequency? So one other thing to consider is when someone signs up for your newsletter, what are the chain of sequencing of newsletters or emails that they get in order to confirm that email? They sign up, they get one email, they click yes to opt in, they get another email. What is the sequencing looking like? You don't just want to acquire people's emails and then do nothing, right? That's not going to help anybody at all. So I would say, in terms of looking at your newsletter cadence, make sure you check the boxes on having a right promo to get newsletter subscriptions, and then making sure that you actually have the right email newsletter funnel set up so you can actually do some segmentation and start to understand, who are these people, where are they coming from, and how am I best retargeting that data? So I love newsletters. Social, knowing that social is going to be a huge driver. But what I would say is spend more time, instead of just focusing 100% on social, on organic social, make sure you have enough time and energy and money allocated to your advertising. The next thing that I like to think is critical to a successful launch is public relations. Now PR has kind of come under a lot of different levels of scrutiny, mostly because most people you want to be friends with a bunch of people and like hop to do all this outreach, drive yourself crazy. PR is like you need it. You need it. I'm sorry, but you do. Actually, I'm not sorry. I like my PR people. I think they're amazing. But you need PR. And the reason why is they're going to be on the forefront, making sure that the editors, that everyone in the market understands your brand. They're the ones that are pitching it. They're looking to get feedback. They can give you great ideas. Do not underestimate the power of your PR team. So I would invest. Some people have bad experiences. People have great experiences. I've had great experiences because, we know how to pick them. So, we know how to get the results that we want. But I would definitely suggest looking into PR for your launch. I think it's extremely important. Now, after a year of having PR, maybe you don't need it anymore. But if you really want to start to gain market share, you need to think about attacking everything all at once, right? You are the conductor of the orchestra, and it is your job to be able to get all the musicians to play at once. And I think that's extremely important. Okay, so what else we need to consider for launch? Your operating costs and your budget. So up until this point, right, up until the moment of launch, you maybe, hopefully, some of you have not, created a budget. So on the budget, you have your startup costs and your budgets that are getting you to the launch point. And then once you launch, right, you then have your ongoing operating costs, right? So your ongoing operating costs are ultimately going to be the things that you're going to say, no matter if I make any money or not, this is how much money I'm spending on my business. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are even self-funding day jobs are saying, oh, I'm just going to pay bills as they come up. What's wrong with that? Well, any opportunities, if you're only going to pay for things as they come up, it might be like, oh, I have $50. I'm going to do ads. Well, are you actually going to get the same run rate on those ads and the same ROI than if you said to me, I have $50 to spend every month, right, for the next 12 months. Amazing. So that means you have $600, right? So you have $600 to spend on ads, $600 to do something with. I can actually do a lot more with that $600 than I can with that $50. So as you guys are looking to plan your operating costs and kind of how you're launching business, look 12 months out, right? What is the income I think I'm going to be receiving? How much do I think I'll be able to invest, and allocate capital and do your strategic planning based on that, right? Super critical. So your operating costs, I think, are essential. The next thing to plan for your launch is personnel, right? Who do you need in terms of personnel? Who are the people who are going to help you drive your business? Even though up until this point, you might have been doing everything yourself, you all know that a scalable business doesn't run as a business of one. In fact, if you want to drive yourself crazy, you become a business of one. You're like, I don't like myself, and I just want to stay at home, and I just want to focus on this business, and I don't want to have a life. Now, granted, a lot of people are in COVID days right now, which is, in essence, none of us can really go outside or do a lot of things, unfortunately. But, what I think is super important is that you guys take a step back and say, what's the lifestyle that I want? And do I actually need to hire somebody and the people that I need to hire in order to know this gets orchestrated properly? That, I think, is another key component here when you look at your key personnel. Now, chances of outsourcing a lot to a lot of other people. And I think that that's great. You definitely want to make sure that you are outsourcing to the right agencies, to the right companies that can do it for you before you scale up in-house. But gosh, everyone needs an assistant to help with shit. So the notion that you somehow need to be the best at I know it's so funny. I know life is all of us, right? Okay, that's a funny comment, but it's not true. We can still have lives. I mean, guys, there's so many classes and things you can be working on and building and impacting yourself and the lives of other people. I mean, yeah, we have no life, but yet we can have so much life, right? So hopefully your entire life isn't your business and you're managing time to relax and be able to do some positive or impactful things for yourself and other people. But you know, having an assistant becomes clutch. And I do not want you guys to underestimate it. I have never met anyone in my entire life that was an excellent product developer and designer, an excellent strategist, an excellent HR person, an excellent financial planner. It doesn't exist. There is not. I mean, when you think about polymaths, like maybe, right? Maybe there are some people who are like very, very good at maybe 2 or 3 of those things. But just as I can sit here and tell you that I'm crappy at designing and product development, I'm certainly not a lawyer, can't read legal documents. I am not very good at, what else am I not really good at? Well, now I've talked about the 2 most important. I'm not a CPA, right? So I can read a budget and I know how to plan and financial forecast and I know how to like look at the numbers, but I'm not a CPA, right? I'm not even an FP&A, right? A financial planning and analyst person. So understanding your core competencies as an individual will set you up to surround yourself with the right people. And I think ultimately, guys, that's kind of the main point here, you know, is that if you do not surround yourself with the right people, right, you're actually not going to be able to get the right things out of it, right? And I think that that's important. So on your launch checklist, we've gone through so many different areas of launching, right? All the different things you need to check off the list. But the people part, the understanding yourself, understanding your core competency, that to me, I think is the most important. You know, that to me is the most impactful. And I think that's ultimately going to be able to get you the furthest. Because launching a business is just as much about getting an idea out there as it is about growing and understanding yourself. Chances are this isn't going to be your first business, and chances are you're going to have a second and a third business. And if you go into it knowing that, and you go into it knowing what your core competencies and strengths are, then you're actually going to be able to grow yourself and build your right team of people. When you have the right team of people, guys, you'll be able to go and do anything. You'll be able to launch lots of businesses, lots of products, because you'll have your people. So having said that, my suggestion for all of you guys out there who are launching your brands, really take some time and understand what you're good at. Take some time and understand where you need to improve your skill set based on a real need and interest, not based on the fact that you think you need to get better because you really suck. We're too old, right? I am. I'm not going to go and try to be great at something that I know I have no interest in, right? I want to make sure that I'm taking my strengths and I'm double downing on the things that I am great at, because that is where I can add the biggest value to my business and also as a leader to the people who work for me. Okay, suggestions on how to know core competencies. Okay, there are a couple different tests out there. There's something called the Strength Finder that you guys can try. There's also like the Enneagram, right? They're like things where you can start to understand like who you are. As far as like what you're good at, you probably already know what you're good at. So if you're good at math, you probably know you're good at math. If you're good at design and creative, you know you're good at that. I'd say look at your struggles, look at your pain points, you know, start to understand what you need to do based on your pain points, right? Like, this is hard. Okay, is it hard and you're excited to learn about it? Is it hard and you're like, oh, I really don't want to know about this? Like, this is super crappy. Figure out based on what feels good, you know, what feels right for you. So as a creative, you can be good at a lot of different things, but my question to you would be, are you telling me that you're excellent at Excel spreadsheets and running finance as well as designing collections and product sourcing and product development and managing factories? And you're also really good at like financial forecasting and also really good at like shipping and logistics and supply chain management? Like, oh my God, if you are, please let all of us know who you are because that's amazing, because that would be incredible. And I would love to know more people who are really good at like all of those things. But chances are right? Based on our interest and based on what we are naturally good at, what we've trained ourselves to be in, we have put ourselves in positions where we have natural strengths and things that we know we like to do. The idea in work isn't to just be working. The dream is to work in the ways doing the things that you love to do. Chances are that's why you decide to start your own business, right? I want to be my own boss, right? More than I'm really good at this one thing, right? There's a sense of independence. There's a sense of I'm leaning into my strength of something I believe in and something that I know of myself to be true. So in that capacity, I would highly suggest you guys take some time to sit down and think about that. If anyone out there is amazing at all those things, honestly, please let me know. Cause I think that's super cool. I, on the other hand, am not. I'm probably good at a few things really, really well. And then other things, I'm like, thank God I have someone on my team who can do this and that, and I can hire someone to do the other thing. And I don't have to worry about that because guess what? At the end of the day, what sacrifices when you try to do everything? Your business sacrifices. If you're terrible at doing a bunch of things and you're doing it yourself and you're doing all of it yourself, it is not going to be easy, right? To present the brand in the way that you want it to be, right? So when you think about presenting the brand, your customers will know, right? If you really are bad at graphic design and you created all of your assets, are they going to buy from you because they like you? I don't think so, right? Because they're going to say, I don't understand the design here. I don't understand the visual components. So you need to understand that all of this is really for the presentation purposes of being able to sell your stuff, right? The whole point is that you're creating a sustainable business model. All right, I'm going to take this question and then guys, unfortunately, I'm going to have to run, but okay, 360 view is fantastic, though it can feel overwhelming. Agreed. Hiring people can be expensive for small brands. It depends where you're looking. Sounds like an assistant is the best first step, core skills for them. So first of all, hiring people can be expensive. It cannot be expensive. Expensive is relative. Launch budgets for a successful brand, relative. So the notion of what costs a lot of money or what a high investment is, I've spoken to some people where $250,000 is a high investment. I've spoken to others where $500,000 was a high investment, where $200,000 was a low investment. It really is very relative depending on the size and scale. Being small is also deceiving. When people say you're a small brand, understand that small brands can make up to $25, $50 million in revenue. So being a small brand is not the right framing here. Even being a startup brand is not the right framing because startups can launch being heavily asset backed. So that's not even the right way to look at this. When we think about where you're at, I would look at it in terms of how much money do I have? So instead of saying I'm a small emerging brand, I don't know what that means. I know $10 million businesses that, are run by 3 people. Is that a brand? Maybe not, right? So wanting to look at what that means in context, I would say actually, instead of saying I'm a small brand, and then I'll go to your other question here about hiring practices, I would actually revert back to the concept of I have X amount of money. I'm a brand that I get more specific. I'm a brand that has one person who's running it, which is me, and I have X amount of money to invest. How do I invest that money in the most efficient way possible? That is where hiring a consultant and someone to help you asset allocate is going to be the most useful, because any single person who wonders, how do I asset allocate being a small business is what 99% of this country is surviving on. Now, small business also means that you can have up to 500 days. So different ways of looking at that. Okay, so let me kind of answer this question about core competencies for an assistant. The things you suck at should be the things your assistant is good in. So an assistant that has overlapping competencies that you have, there's no point because you already know how to do it. If you're great at graphic design, don't hire an assistant that's great at graphic design, right? Think of this as hiring someone who's going to do the heavy lift on the things that you're like, ugh, I don't want to do that. That's going to be different for all of you guys, right? So again, the very first thing is make the list. Figure out what you suck at, what you're great at, what you want to learn, and also like what you don't want to learn. Like, there's stuff you don't want to learn. That's okay. It's okay. You don't need to learn it. I forgive you. You don't have to learn it. Don't learn it, right? Actually, we're all better off if you don't learn it, right? We need you as business owners to be leaning into your strengths, to be going forward with some sort of momentum to help you actually execute, right? And then to be able to pivot and kind of make decisions and be agile. So who you start off today in your business is not who you're going to be in 3 to 5 years. Don't put yourself in a hole here, right? Let's really make sure that over time you have the right people on board with your company and that you understand who you are to your company. Who are you? As I point to me, who are you? Who are you to your business? Who do you want to be? Who do you not want to be? And how are you going to do this in the most efficient way possible? All right, guys, that is all for today. I'm Syama Maher, CEO of Scaling Retail. Super stoked to be with you guys once again. Find out who you are, figure out what you suck at. You can find me on Maker's Row, on Embark.live, but figure out what you're good at, right? And what you're not good at, if you're a creative, might be the business stuff, right? And that's where someone like me comes in. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a wonderful rest of your day.